Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. I never meant to end up so deep in the woods. It started with something as innocent as a hike. A need to disconnect, to breathe air that wasn't stale with electricity and fluorescent hums. I'd driven north for hours, the highway shrinking behind me until it became just a memory in the rearview. No signal. No GPS. Just me, a paper map, and a sharp longing for silence. I found the trailhead by accident. It wasn't marked on the guide I picked up at the last gas station. No signs, no name, just a weather-worn post leaning slightly to the left, half swallowed by blackberry brambles. But the trail itself was clear, though narrow, curling between the pines like a path drawn in haste and half erased. I hesitated for only a moment. Then I stepped through the green curtain, and the forest swallowed me whole. The first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not peace, there's a difference, but silence. Thick and heavy, like the world had gone underwater. My boots made soft crunches on the packed dirt, but even those seemed muffled. No birdsong. No wind. Just the creak of old trees shifting like bones in the cold. There was a strange smell in the air. Not rot, exactly. More like damp earth and copper, like blood soaked into moss. Still, I kept walking. The trail was surprisingly well kept for something so hidden. The underbrush didn't crowd it, and the path dipped and curved as though following some ancient design. I found myself stepping with care, trying not to disturb anything. The trees here were tall and old. Their bark flaked in long gray ribbons, and some trunks split into gaping hollows, like mouths opened mid-scream. I told myself that was just the way wood warped with age. That everything in this forest could be explained. But my gut had a different story. I should have turned back when I noticed the cairns. At first, I thought they were natural, little stacks of stone, placed at intervals beside the trail. But they were too precise. Too intentional. Each pile was built the same way, 5 flat stones stacked from largest to smallest, the top one marked with a single line, carved deep. Almost like a tally. Almost like a warning. I tried not to look at them after the 4th or 5th. But they kept showing up, spaced perfectly apart, like they were counting something. Maybe me. The sun filtered through the canopy in thin, pale strands, barely touching the forest floor. Time was hard to track. My watch had stopped ticking somewhere past the last cairn. Dead battery, I thought. But still, odd. I passed a tree with rope marks around its base, thick indentations, like something had once been tied to it, or someone. There were deep claw marks on the bark above, reaching far higher than any animal should have been able to reach. I told myself it was bears. Or boredom. Someone playing games with a knife and too much time on their hands. But I kept walking. Something about the trail pulled me forward. Like gravity in reverse, like the forest wanted me to go deeper. Then I heard it. A whisper. Not words, nothing I could understand, but a soft, breathless murmur that drifted through the trees like mist. It brushed the back of my neck and sank into my spine. I turned, expecting to see someone. Nothing. No movement. No shadow. Just trees. Just pines. But the air was colder now. I could feel it in my lungs, like frost had settled between my ribs. I tried to speak. Just to say something, to break the silence, but my voice caught in my throat. It didn't feel like fear. Not yet. It felt like forgetting. Like something in me had already begun to unravel. I pressed on. Eventually, the trail widened. It opened into a small clearing, overgrown with ferns and bone-white mushrooms. In the center stood a stone marker. Obsidian black, like it had been dragged from the mouth of a volcano, sharp and unnatural against the green. There were more carvings on it. Spirals, eyes, and something that looked like a mouth with too many teeth. My skin prickled just looking at it. I walked around it, careful not to touch it. There were no birds here. No insects. Not even a breeze. Just the forest, watching. I should have turned back. I should have run. Instead, I sat down. I don't know why. My legs weren't tired. My heart was beating steady. But something in my head whispered, rest. Just for a moment. So I did. I sat in the moss, and for a while, I listened to the quiet. It wasn't silent anymore. The forest had started breathing. Slow. Rhythmic. In and out. The leaves rustled not with wind, but with the rise and fall of something vast, slumbering just beneath the soil. I could feel it in my fingertips, in my teeth. The pulse of something old. Something awake. And then, the whisper came back. Closer this time. Just behind my ear. It said my name. I stood up fast, stumbling back. My eyes scanned the trees, nothing moved. But the whisper had been real. I know it had. It was soft and wet and rasped like bark peeling. It knew me. I didn't wait to hear it again. I turned and walked quickly back toward the trail. Only, the trail was gone. Where it should have been, there was only underbrush. A wall of thorns and ferns. The cairns had vanished. The black stone stood silent behind me, as if amused. Panic rose like bile in my throat, but I didn't scream. Screaming felt wrong here, like it would draw something out from the dark. I picked a direction and walked. The forest didn't like that. The trees began to shift, subtly at first. A branch here, a root there. But it was enough. I could feel the path changing beneath me. The ground sloped upward, then suddenly dipped. I walked in circles. I swear I passed the same dead crow 3 times. Its eye was missing, replaced with a single, polished stone. I think it was watching me. Eventually, I came to another clearing. And there, hanging from a tree, was a windscreen. Made of teeth. It clinked softly in the breeze that hadn't been there before. A dozen tiny, yellowed molars strung together with thread. Each one carved with the same spiral I'd seen on the stone. I didn't stop this time. I walked right past it. And the whisper followed me. I don't know how long I wandered. Time had lost its edges. It didn't move forward anymore, it just coiled, like a snake, twisting back on itself. The sun never shifted. The light stayed that same weak shade of gray, leaking through the treetops like something too tired to try anymore. The whisper still followed me. Always behind. Always just out of reach. Never loud, but never gone. Sometimes it sounded like breath. Other times like water dripping in a cave. Once, it sounded like my mother's voice, saying my name the way she used to when I was half asleep and feverish. I stopped trusting my ears. I tried marking the trees. At first, I used stones, scratching shallow lines into the bark. But when I circled back, and I always circled back, the marks were gone. Or worse, wrong. Bent into spirals. Eyes. Teeth. One mark I found had been carved inward. Like the tree had opened up and swallowed my scratch, chewing it into something else. After a while, I started noticing things in the corner of my vision. They were never fully there. Just hints of motion. A flicker of fabric behind a tree trunk. A pale hand slipping behind moss. Once, I saw the curve of an antler, too high up to belong to anything I'd ever heard of. The forest wasn't empty. It had never been empty. There were things in it. Watching. Waiting. I came upon another cairn eventually. But this one was broken, the top stones scattered, the base crushed under what looked like a hoof print. Only, it was wrong. Hooves don't have claws. I moved faster. My boots were soaked through. I hadn't seen rain, but the ground was wet and pulsing, like something underneath was breathing moisture up through the roots. The trees leaned in closer now. They whispered too, not in words, but in creaks and groans and sighs. Some sounded like laughter. The air had grown thicker. Not hot, just dense. Like I was walking through breath, through something living. I began to feel watched not just from behind, but from below. Like the soil itself had eyes. Like the forest floor was thinner than it should be, and something underneath it was listening. I don't remember falling. One moment I was walking, and the next my foot slipped into a hole hidden under dead leaves. I tumbled, rolled down a short incline, and landed hard on my side. My breath hitched. My ankle screamed. But that wasn't what made me freeze. I'd landed in a nest. A large one. It wasn't twigs and grass like a bird's. It was made of shredded bark, moss, scraps of clothing, and bone. A dozen small bones, finger bones, maybe, arranged in a circle like petals around the center. The center was empty. Something had lived here. Something had come back here. And it was gone now. I scrambled out as fast as I could, ignoring the throb in my ankle. I didn't look back. Eventually, I found the path again, not the one I came from. A new one. Narrower. Older. Almost hidden. It wasn't marked by cairns, but by bones, small ones, tucked into knots of trees, hanging from threads in the branches like ornaments. I should have turned away. But the forest didn't give me options anymore. It gave me corridors. And this was the only one open. So I followed it. The whisper was louder now. Still not words, not exactly, but more insistent. More rhythmic. Like it was chanting something I couldn't quite understand. I realized I hadn't heard my own footsteps in a while. The path led downward, into a hollow where the light barely reached. Ferns the size of children's beds fanned out from the sides, and mushrooms glowed faintly blue near the roots. I could feel something buzzing beneath the surface, not insects. Something deeper. Like a hum in my bones. And then I found the circle. Stones ringed the clearing, tall as me, slick with moss and carvings worn down by time. Not runes. Not letters. Just shapes. Hungry ones. Some were spirals. Others looked like claws, or mouths full of needles. I couldn't look at them too long without my head aching. At the center of the circle was a pit. Shallow, filled with black water. Perfectly still, even as the air around it moved. I didn't want to look into it. But I did. And I saw. I don't know. Not clearly. My face, but older. My eyes, but wrong. Hollow. Smiling in a way I'd never smiled before, with teeth too many and too sharp. And behind me, in the reflection, someone was standing there. I spun around, heart stuttering in my chest. Nothing. Just trees. But the air had shifted again. It smelled like metal and wet fur. And the whisper was no longer behind me, it was all around me, echoing in my skull. It said, "Stay." It wasn't a request. It was a rule. A law. I backed away from the pool. My foot brushed something, a bundle wrapped in damp cloth. I reached down without thinking and pulled it loose. It was a journal. Leather-bound, soaked through. Pages warped. The writing was cramped and erratic, some pages torn out, others filled with the same line over and over. The forest is a mouth. The forest is a mouth. The forest is a mouth. One page had a rough map. Circles. Lines. A marking labeled the loop. Another had a warning, scrawled in red ink that had long since faded into rust: don't follow the lights. Don't answer the whisper. Don't trust the clearing. The forest forgets you on purpose. You are not lost, you are being kept. I felt eyes on me again. Not from behind this time. From above. I didn't look. I ran. The forest didn't fight me. It let me run, which was worse. Like it wanted me to think I had a choice. The trees didn't move. The air didn't resist. I sprinted through the ferns and low branches until my lungs burned. I stopped only when I hit a wall of stone. Not natural. Built. A massive pillar, half buried in moss and vine, carved with that same spiral, the one I kept seeing, over and over. My fingers itched just looking at it. I heard footsteps then. Not mine. Deliberate. Crunching leaves. Pausing. Then another. And another. Coming from all sides. I pressed my back to the stone and held my breath. Whatever was walking didn't speak. Didn't pant. Just moved. Closer. Closer. Then silence. Until the whisper returned. This time, it didn't sound like wind or voice. It sounded like me. You're almost home, it said, in my exact voice. Just one more turn. I couldn't move. My back pressed against the cold stone, sweat cooling on my skin despite the chill. The footsteps had stopped. The forest was holding its breath. And the whisper, my whisper, still echoed inside my head. You're almost home. I wanted to scream. To tell it was wrong. To say that I wasn't anything like this place. But my mouth stayed shut. Because the voice felt like mine, but it wasn't. It was twisted. Hollow. Like a reflection in cracked glass. Then something shifted in the shadows. A shape. Tall. Thin. Moving with impossible stillness. It stepped out into the dim light filtering from above. No face, just a dark void where it should have been. The figure didn't blink, didn't breathe. It just watched me with that emptiness, and I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. You belong here, it said, in a voice like dry leaves. I took a step back. No, I whispered. I don't. The figure didn't respond. It tilted its head slowly, as if confused by my defiance. The forest around us seemed to lean in, bending the trees closer, closing the space. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. The moss beneath my feet felt like it was growing, creeping up my boots. I tried to look away, but the figure was still there, unmoving. Suddenly, I heard voices. At first, soft. Faint. Like children playing far away. Then closer. Whispers and murmurs weaving through the trees. Come home. Rest with us. Forever. The voices swirled around me, layered and overlapping. Some were angry, others pleading. Some sounded like laughter, others like crying. I realized they weren't outside me. They were inside my head. The figure stepped closer, and the voices grew louder. My skin prickled. I wanted to cover my ears, but my hands wouldn't obey. Don't listen, I told myself. It's not real. But the voices didn't stop. They whispered secrets I couldn't understand. Names I'd never heard. Places I'd never been. And the worst part, they knew things about me. The girl I was before the forest. The choices I'd made. The lies I'd told myself. I collapsed against the stone pillar, clutching my head. The voices tangled into a roar, drowning out everything else. Then, just as suddenly, silence. The figure was gone. The voices had vanished. I sat there for what felt like hours, my breath ragged, my mind raw. Finally, I stood. And I kept walking. The path led me deeper into the forest, twisting through ancient trees that seemed to watch me with quiet judgment. The moss grew thicker, the air heavier. I passed more cairns, each one different. Some made of bones, some of stones, others of strange objects I didn't recognize. One had a small mirror hung from it, cracked and fogged, reflecting my weary face back at me. I caught my reflection and saw something shift in my eyes, a shadow that hadn't been there before. As I walked, the whisper returned. Not in my head this time, but from the forest itself. A voice on the wind, calling me. The voice on the wind wasn't words. Not really. It was more like a feeling, curling around my mind like smoke, comforting, but poisonous. It drew me forward, deeper into the ancient heart of the forest where the light grew dim and the trees grew impossibly tall. I stumbled into a place where the moss carpeted everything, the ground, the rocks, even the tree trunks. Thick, damp, and unnerving, it seemed alive, watching me, waiting. I knelt to touch it, and my fingers sank into the soft green like skin. It was cold and strangely sticky, like it had a pulse. I tried to pull away, but it held me just a moment longer, and then I heard it. A soft, wet sigh, almost like breath. The forest was breathing. I didn't want to stay. But I couldn't move. The moss crawled along my skin, cold and slow, like tiny fingers tracing patterns I didn't want to know. I heard whispers rising from the earth itself. Not voices this time, but memories. Shadows of things buried under roots and dirt. I saw flashes, a child laughing in the rain, a man cutting wood with a crooked knife, a woman weeping beneath a starless sky. They weren't mine, but they felt close. Tangled with mine. Bound to this place. I realized the moss was remembering. And so was the forest. I pulled my hands free and scrambled back, gasping for air. The moss clung stubbornly to my jacket, like it didn't want me to leave. Ahead, a faint light flickered between the trees. A lantern, swinging gently, as if someone was walking just out of sight. I wanted to follow it. I wanted to run. But my legs felt like lead. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Not mine. Not human. Heavy. Uneven. I turned, heart pounding, but saw nothing but shifting shadows. The lantern's light grew brighter. I realized it wasn't moving, it was hanging from a branch. I stepped closer, and the ground beneath the lantern was littered with things. Small bones. Broken teeth. Old trinkets, buttons, shards of glass, a rusted key. A dozen pairs of eyes stared back from the darkness, reflected in the glass of the lantern, in the wet stones, in the wetness of the moss. They watched me. The whisper came again, close now, almost a purr. Rest. I shook my head. No, but the forest had already made its choice. The moss reached up, creeping along my arms, cold and tight. It didn't hurt. Not yet. But I could feel it sinking in, threading into my skin, weaving its way inside. I stumbled backward, breaking free from its grasp. The whisper turned into a laugh. A soft, awful laugh that wasn't human. And I knew, this forest wasn't just watching. It was hungry. I ran. Not because I knew where I was going, but because I had to get away, away from the moss, the eyes, the voice that wanted to pull me under. The trees blurred as I pushed through them, branches clawing at my skin and clothes. My breath came in ragged gasps, chest burning, but still, I couldn't stop. The forest was changing beneath my feet, the ground turning soft and hollow like the crust of a buried wound. Then the earth gave way. I fell. Cold darkness swallowed me whole. For a moment, I thought I was broken. shattered like a dropped glass. But then my eyes adjusted, faint shapes surfacing out of the black. I was in a cave. Or something like one. The walls glistened wet, covered with moss and strange carvings, spirals again, and eyes, and teeth. The air was damp and heavy, filled with the faintest echo of dripping water and distant murmurs. I tried to stand, but the ground beneath me shifted. Soft and uneven, like a nest of roots and bones. The whisper came again, but now it was layered, a choir of voices, overlapping and urgent. Stay, they said. Sleep. Remember. My mind ached as the voices pressed in, memories not my own flooding my thoughts, faces blurred and pale, hands reaching, eyes full of fear and longing. I saw flashes, the same child, the man with the crooked knife, the woman beneath the starless sky. Their stories were tangled with mine now, threads woven into the dark fabric of the forest. I realized I was not alone. Shadows shifted in the corners of the cave. Figures moved just beyond sight. I called out, voice trembling. Who's there? Silence. Then a single voice answered. Home. It was my voice again, but softer, kinder, like a lullaby. I wanted to run. To flee the darkness. But my legs wouldn't move. I sank to my knees. The cave breathed around me, alive with secrets and memories. And I understood. The forest wasn't trying to trap me. It was trying to save me. The cave floor was soft beneath my knees, like the earth itself was cradling me. The voices circled, whispering secrets older than I could grasp. They were memories, lives long forgotten, buried here, tangled beneath roots and stone. I touched the wall, tracing the spirals carved deep into the mossy rock. The carvings pulsed beneath my fingers, as if breathing. The forest was alive. Not just trees and moss and dirt. Something older. Something ancient. I closed my eyes and let the voices wash over me. I saw visions, a seed planted in dark soil, pushing tiny roots through the earth. The seed grew, slow and patient, twisting around bones and stone, weaving life and death into one. The forest was a living memory, a place where everything that had ever been was still alive, still waiting. I opened my eyes, and the cave around me shimmered. The shadows grew faces, soft, sad, hopeful. They were the forest's children. Lost souls who had wandered too far, caught by the forest's hunger, or maybe its mercy. I felt a pull deep in my chest, a seed planting itself inside me, growing roots in my bones. The forest wasn't just keeping me. It was making me. The voices sang softly now, a lullaby tangled with the wind. Grow with us. Stay with us. Become part of the forest's song. I wanted to scream. To run. But my limbs felt heavy, my breath shallow. I was becoming one with the forest. The seed beneath the soil was growing. And there was no turning back. The weight in my chest grew heavier with every breath, like roots twisting around my ribs. I tried to move, but my limbs felt sluggish, as if they belonged to someone else. The shadows in the cave stretched longer, reaching toward me, their faces soft but insistent. They whispered my name in voices like wind through dead leaves. I wanted to resist. I wanted to fight. But the forest had already begun to claim me. Outside, faint light pulsed through the cracks in the stone, filtering in like a distant heartbeat. The voices told me stories, stories of people who had come before, who had lost themselves to the forest and found a different kind of life beneath its branches. Some had become watchers, bound to the trees. Others had become the moss, the green breath that pulled wanderers close. And some had become something else. I shivered despite myself. The whispers circled me, their words like vines tightening. Stay. Grow. Root. I reached up to touch my chest and felt the first prickling, tiny seeds embedded in my skin, pushing beneath the surface. The sensation was strange, part pain, part warmth. I realized then the forest wasn't just a place. It was a living web. And I was becoming a thread in it. My mind fluttered between clarity and dream, caught in a liminal space where time blurred. I saw myself in the distance, walking the paths I had taken, circling endlessly. I heard my voice calling, a distant echo begging for escape. But there was no way out. Only deeper in. The forest's roots wrapped around my soul. I was no longer just a visitor. I was part of the story now. The forest's song was my song. And it would sing me home. The forest was no longer outside me. It was inside. The seed beneath my skin grew roots that spread through my veins, thickening, twisting, binding. I felt the last flicker of my old self slipping away, like a candle guttering in the wind. Around me, the cave walls shimmered with faint light, but it wasn't daylight. It was something darker. Something old. The whisper came again, soft and final. Home. I reached out, not knowing what I sought, or if I even wanted to find it. The shadows folded in, and I was swallowed whole. I was falling, and then I was still. The world was silence. The trees were gone. Only the roots remained, wrapped tight, endless, pulsing with slow breath. I was the forest now. I was the whisper. I was the last light fading. And I understood the truth, there is no escape. Only becoming. When I opened my eyes, the world was quiet. Not empty, but still, like the breath before a storm. I was standing. Somewhere new. Or maybe somewhere very old. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, heavy with the promise of rain. But the sky was gray, the sun a pale disk behind a curtain of mist. I looked down and saw my hands, but they were different. Root-like veins traced beneath my skin, and my fingers ended in delicate tendrils. I was no longer human. But neither was I fully forest. Something in between. I heard a soft rustling behind me and turned. Figures emerged from the fog. They were the shadows from the cave, the watchers, the moss-born spirits. Their faces were kind, welcoming. "Welcome home," they said in unison. I felt no fear. Only a strange peace. The circle had completed itself. I was part of the forest's endless song. The whisper was no longer a voice. It was a breath. A heartbeat. A promise. And I knew then, that some paths don't end. They only begin again. The forest was alive in ways I never imagined. Every breath I took felt like drawing in centuries of secrets. The fog curled around me like a living thing, soft and cold against my skin, or what was left of it. I moved forward, roots trailing from my fingertips, the earth humming beneath my feet. There was no path, only the endless weaving of trees and shadows. I listened to the forest's song, a deep, slow melody, like the pulse of the world itself. Time stretched and folded. Moments became years, years became moments. I saw faces in the bark of trees, faces frozen in time, eyes wide and full of stories. Some smiled. Others wept. I whispered back, trying to remember their names, their lives. But the forest kept its secrets close. The wind shifted, carrying faint voices, laughter, cries, whispered warnings. I followed the sound, knowing it would lead me somewhere, or perhaps nowhere at all. The moss beneath me pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. And I walked. And walked. Until the forest and I were one. The forest shifted around me like a living dream. The trees grew closer, their twisted branches weaving together to form a dark cathedral roof. The air grew colder, heavier, filled with the scent of damp earth and decay. I found myself drawn to a hollow, a small clearing hidden beneath an ancient, gnarled oak. The ground was carpeted with thick moss and scattered with brittle leaves that crunched beneath my feet. At the center lay something half-buried, a stone altar, cracked and worn, covered in strange symbols I could barely make out. It hummed with quiet power, a heartbeat beneath the soil. I knelt beside it, brushing away moss and dirt. The carvings glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the whispers around me. The voices returned, softer now, like a lullaby from another time. They spoke of loss, of longing, of forgotten promises made to the forest long ago. I felt their sorrow seep into my bones. The hollow seemed to breathe, inhaling my fear, exhaling an ancient sadness. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath me, and a chill ran down my spine. From the shadows, figures emerged, not the watchers or the moss-born, but something older. Elders of the forest, their faces worn like bark, eyes glowing with deep knowledge. They circled the altar, chanting in a language I didn't understand but felt deep in my soul. I wanted to speak, to ask what this place was, what it wanted from me. But my voice was lost in the wind. The elders' chant grew louder, filling the hollow with a wave of sound that pulled me closer, deeper into the heart of the forest story. And I knew, this place remembered everything. And it would never forget me. The elders' chant faded into a low hum that seemed to pulse beneath my skin, matching the slow throb of the ancient altar. I could feel it, the forest's heartbeat, steady and relentless, like the slow pulse of a giant, sleeping beast beneath the soil. My fingers traced the carvings again, and I realized the symbols were moving, shifting like liquid stone. Each pulse sent ripples through the air, vibrating through the roots and moss and into my very bones. A warmth blossomed in my chest, spreading outward like the first light of dawn. But it was not warmth like the sun's, it was older, deeper, the warmth of life buried beneath layers of earth and memory. The elders surrounded me, their faces unreadable but kind. They didn't speak, but I felt their presence like a gentle tether holding me in place. I closed my eyes and let the pulse carry me away, carried by whispers that felt like the breath of the forest itself. Visions unfolded behind my eyelids, ancient trees rising from fertile ground, storms raging and passing, seasons turning in endless cycles. I saw the forest's first breath, the moment life took root in the darkness. I saw the faces of those who had come before, lost souls now woven into the fabric of the forest, part of the endless song. And then I saw myself. Not as I was, but as I was becoming, a seed, a root, a voice in the wind. When I opened my eyes, the elders had vanished, and the hollow was still once more. But the pulse remained, steady, unwavering. The forest had chosen me. And I had no choice but to answer. The pulse beneath my skin grew stronger, sinking with the rhythm of the forest itself. It was like breathing, slow, deep, eternal. I rose from the altar, the moss still clinging to my clothes, and stepped into the hollow's shadows. The air was thick with silence, but it was a silence full of life. Every leaf, every twig, every stone seemed to hum with energy, as if the forest itself was watching me, waiting for my next move. I took a breath, the cold, damp air filling my lungs, sharp and sweet. And with that breath came memories. Not my own, but borrowed, the first spring rains pattering on new leaves, the crackle of dry twigs underfoot in a long-forgotten autumn, the gentle rustle of wind weaving through branches during a quiet winter night. The forest's breath was a story, told in sighs and whispers. I realized I was no longer just a visitor. I was part of that story now. The trees seemed to lean closer, their trunks twisting like ancient hands reaching out. The shadows flickered, revealing glimpses of faces, watchers, wanderers, memories made flesh. I felt their eyes on me, full of welcome and warning. A path opened before me, faint, overgrown, but unmistakably there. I stepped onto it, feeling the pulse quicken. The forest was alive, and I was breathing with it. With every step, I felt myself fading into the green, becoming part of the moss, the roots, the whispering leaves. The forest was not a place to escape. It was a place to belong. And I belonged. The path beneath my feet was soft, cushioned by years of fallen leaves and tangled roots. Every step stirred a faint murmur, as if the forest itself was whispering secrets just beyond hearing. The trees swayed gently, their branches brushing against one another like soft sighs in the wind. I listened closely, trying to catch the words hidden in their rustling. It was a language older than time, spoken not with voice but with sound, a living song carried on the breeze. The leaves seemed to know me. They rustled with recognition, flickering in shades of green and gold. Shadows danced along the trunks, weaving patterns that shifted like stories told and retold. I reached out to touch a low-hanging branch, fingers grazing the delicate leaves. The moment I did, a shiver ran through me, a connection, electric and cold. Visions blossomed in my mind, a clearing bathed in silver moonlight, figures moving silently between trees, a fire burning low, shadows flickering on moss-covered stones, a voice calling softly, a name whispered on the wind. The forest was alive with memories, stories trapped in bark and leaf, in stone and soil. I walked deeper, feeling the murmurs grow louder, weaving around me like a cloak. Sometimes the voices would rise into a chorus, a haunting melody that both soothed and unsettled. I wanted to follow their call, but the path twisted endlessly, folding back on itself. I was caught in the forest's song, a note in its timeless symphony. And as I walked, I understood, the forest was never silent. It was always speaking. Waiting. The murmuring leaves faded into a heavy silence as I stepped deeper into the forest's heart. The light dimmed, filtered through dense branches that seemed to close in around me like a cage. I paused, the rough bark of a towering pine pressing against my back. The air grew thick and still, the kind of silence that pressed into your skin and made your pulse thunder in your ears. Then I saw it, a shadow, flickering just beyond the edge of my vision. I turned sharply, heart racing, but there was nothing there. Just trees and moss and the soft rustle of the wind. Yet, I could feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. I whispered into the stillness, "Who's there?" No answer. Only the forest's breath. I pressed forward, every nerve alert, footsteps muffled by thick moss and fallen needles. The shadow moved again, elusive and slow, never fully revealing itself. Was it part of the forest? A watcher? Or something else entirely? The hairs on my arms stood on end as I realized the shadow wasn't just watching me. It was following. The whispers returned, softer now, threading through the air like silk. Come closer. Stay with us. Join the song. A chill ran down my spine as I realized I was no longer just a wanderer. I was a participant in the forest's endless ritual. And whatever waited in the shadows was waiting for me to take my place. A thick mist began to seep through the trees, curling around my ankles like cold fingers. The world blurred at the edges, colors fading into pale grays and muted greens. Every sound was muffled, swallowed beneath the soft, wet hush of fog. I stepped forward cautiously, unsure if the path was still beneath me or if I was treading on empty air. The forest seemed to breathe with me, slow, steady, as if inhaling the mist and exhaling secrets. Shapes flickered at the edge of my vision, indistinct figures moving just beyond reach, their forms half seen and always shifting. The whispers were softer now, like a breeze brushing through dead leaves. I tried to call out, but my voice was swallowed by the mist. The veil thickened, wrapping around me like a shroud. I felt both lost and found, suspended between waking and dreaming. Time folded inward, moments stretching into endless folds. The forest was no longer a place. It was a living presence, ancient, patient, waiting. And I was becoming part of its breath, its mist, its endless veil. The mist thickened until it was a solid veil, swallowing the trees and the ground beneath my feet. The world became a muted echo, colors faded to shades of gray, sounds softened to distant murmurs. And then I heard it. A song. Soft and hollow, like the wind threading through hollowed logs. It wasn't a melody I recognized, but it stirred something deep inside me, a memory I never lived, a longing I never knew. The song pulled me forward, deeper into the vale, guiding my steps over roots and stones slick with moss. Each note was a whisper from the forest's soul, telling stories of lives folded into earth and time. The voices rose and fell in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I felt myself dissolving into the song, becoming part of the hollow melody that wrapped around the trees and filled the spaces between the shadows. The boundaries between me and the forest blurred. Was I listening, or was I singing? Was I awake, or was this a dream? The song grew louder, a chorus of lost souls and ancient trees, of roots and rain and endless night. And as I moved forward, I knew, the forest's song was endless. And I was a note within it, forever humming in the hollow. The mist began to thin, revealing shapes blurred and unfamiliar, twisted trees with limbs like ancient fingers, tangled roots that writhed beneath the soil, and shadows that stretched longer than they should. I found myself at the edge of a clearing, but it wasn't like any I'd seen before. The ground was cracked and dry, a sharp contrast to the damp moss I had walked on. Here, the air was heavier, thick with a scent like burning wood and something darker, something almost metallic. The forest song had fallen silent, replaced by a stillness so profound it pressed on my chest. I stepped forward cautiously, senses alert. Something was watching. From the edges of my vision, I caught glimpses of movement, shapes darting between trunks, eyes glinting in the shadows. I felt a pull, a tug at the edges of my mind, urging me to go further, to step beyond the border between what I knew and what I feared. But with every step forward, the world seemed to fray, colors bleeding into each other, sounds warping into echoes. I realized I was no longer just walking through the forest. I was walking into the forest's own heart, the place where reality bent, and the past and present tangled. A place where the whispers grew into screams, and the shadows had faces. I wanted to turn back. But the forest held me fast. And I knew, there was no turning back now. The air thickened, heavy with anticipation. Every step I took echoed too loudly, swallowed quickly by the dense silence that wrapped the forest like a shroud. I could feel them, eyes watching from the darkness beyond the trees. Not human eyes, but something older, colder, full of a patient hunger. The shadows shifted, moving just beyond the edge of my vision. I tried to catch a glimpse, but all I saw were flickers, like the glint of polished stones, or the flash of distant stars hidden beneath the canopy. My breath quickened. The pulse beneath my skin beat faster, syncing with the rhythm of unseen hearts. I whispered into the stillness, hoping to break the silence. "Who's there?" Only the rustle of leaves answered. A chill crawled down my spine as I realized the forest was alive with watching, waiting, judging. The watchers were patient, eternal. They knew I was no longer just a wanderer. I was part of their story now. And their eyes burned with a light that never faded. The forest floor beneath me pulsed softly, as if alive, breathing in sync with the slow throb beneath my skin. Roots twisted and writhed just beneath the mossy carpet, murmuring secrets I couldn't quite grasp. I knelt down, pressing my palm against the cool earth. The whispers grew louder, curling through the soil like tendrils reaching toward me. I closed my eyes, letting the voices wash over me. They spoke of ancient things, things buried deep beneath the roots, where light never reached. Stories of forgotten beings who slept beneath the forest, dreaming in endless darkness. Their voices were like wind over dry leaves, soft but insistent. The roots pulsed, drawing me closer to their hidden world. I felt a pull deep in my chest, an ache that was both pain and longing. Slowly, I sank to the ground, fingers sinking into the damp moss. The whispers became a chorus, wrapping around me, drawing me deeper into the forest's heart. And in that darkness beneath the roots, I felt the forest's true pulse, endless. Unseen. Unbroken. The forest's pulse beneath my skin had become a roar, filling every corner of my mind. The roots beneath me seemed to reach higher, twisting and coiling like veins, pulling me closer to something, somewhere, deeper than I had ever dared to go. The air was thick with the scent of earth and rain, heavy and alive. Every breath I took drew me further in, weaving me tighter into the forest's endless song. Ahead, the trees parted, revealing a vast hollow unlike any I had seen before. Its edges were lined with ancient stones carved with symbols glowing faintly, casting eerie shadows on the mossy ground. I stepped into the hollow, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices blending into a singular, haunting melody. I felt their meaning without understanding words. This was a place of reckoning, the heart of the forest, where all stories met and endings began. My body felt light and heavy all at once, as if I were both sinking into the earth and rising toward the sky. The pulse thrummed strongest here, a wild, ancient rhythm that echoed in my bones. I knelt by the largest stone and pressed my hands to its cool surface. The carvings shifted beneath my fingers, forming shapes I couldn't comprehend yet felt connected to: roots, branches, faces, eyes. A presence stirred behind me, ancient and vast. I dared not look. Instead, I surrendered. Surrendered to the forest, to its breath, to its endless song. And as I did, I knew, this was no end. Only the beginning of a new becoming. The pulse was no longer just beneath my skin. It was me, every beat a tether binding my heart to the forest's endless rhythm. I closed my eyes and felt the forest seep into my soul, its ancient breath, its endless song, wrapping around me like a cloak of moss and shadow. My body began to change. My fingers lengthened, roughening like bark. My skin cooled, taking on the texture of moss and earth. I was fading, dissolving into the green. Yet, I was more alive than ever, every nerve alive with the forest's memory, every breath a thread in its sprawling tapestry. The voices whispered louder now, not with warning, but with welcome. You belong. You are one. You are forever. A slow smile spread across my lips, not human but something deeper, a knowing older than time. The trees bowed gently, their branches caressing me like hands. The earth cradled me, lifting me higher, roots weaving through my veins. I was no longer alone. I was the forest. And the forest was me. The song continued, endless, haunting, beautiful. I was home. The last breath I took was not mine alone. It was the breath of centuries, the sigh of the forest itself, endless and eternal. My voice, now a part of the wind, drifted through the branches, a whisper threading through the leaves like a secret never forgotten. The forest wrapped around me, its roots and vines weaving through my veins, its shadows dancing in my eyes. I was no longer a visitor. I was the memory, the guardian, the pulse beneath the bark. Time folded over itself, moments stretched into infinity. The watchers became my eyes. The whispers became my voice. And I became the forest's eternal whisper. The wind carried my story on its breath, a lullaby for the lost, a warning for the curious, a promise to the trees. So if you ever wander beneath the pines, and hear a soft sigh, a gentle murmur, know it is me. Whispering in the dark. Forever part of the forest's endless song.